surprise, and Zen Dobria. And that is hello to you, my True Life family from Gdansk, Poland. A couple of years ago, I came before you to let you know about how it was growing up in the South as an African American and through the integration of the schools and the society there and experiencing bigotry for the first time. But then also finding a friend and several friends, but one friend in particular, Charles Park, who took me as a brother, who then his family, the Parks, welcomed me as their son and as their brother, and just welcomed me so much it just made it a big difference. Now here I am today in Gdansk, Poland, and I'm going to share with you my experiences of welcoming again. For those of you who don't know, back in December 2020, I retired from federal service. And I did that because my sweetheart of 6.5 years, who was Ukrainian, still is Ukrainian, could not get a visa to come to America. So I said, I'm of age, why not retire? So I retired in December of 2020, like I said, and then it came to Ukraine of January 2021. Got married, settled in, wonderful friends of meeting there, just get welcomed by everyone. My biggest hurdle was the language, so I started learning Russian and Ukrainian, and that along with modern technology of the phones got me through shopping and everything else, going through plays and concerts and those kinds of things. And all was well up until about 5:20 in the morning on the 24th of February of this year. We were suddenly woken up with loud bangs around our city there of Mykolaiv, Ukraine. Come to find out sometime later, a few minutes later, that these were the war in Ukraine had continued. Now, for those of us in America, we think that the war started this February, but it's been going on for the Ukrainians with the Russians since 2014, when they invaded Crimea, as well as the Donbass area on the southeastern part of Ukraine. And so it took a couple of hours for me to convince my wife that this is serious and we need to leave. So once I convinced her we needed to leave, we packed what few clothes we could get into a suitcase, stuffed that into our car, then went over to her parents to get them so we could leave out of Ukraine because I knew that it was going to be bad. We got to her parents and they were not convinced. You know, if you could imagine, they had they were born there in Mykolaiv. They had lived there in Mykolaiv. They were there in Mykolaiv. They were retired there in Mykolaiv. They had their friends there in Mykolaiv, and they were not ready to go. So after several hours of trying to convince them, we finally then headed to Poland. And it took us a day to get from Mykolaiv to the checkpoint. And I'll leave the rest of that in terms of getting through that checkpoint to Pastor Guy, who has an article that Penn Live did it on us in terms of how to get through that checkpoint and everything. But I'm going to go back. We got to uh, Krakow, Poland, and stayed there. We said just arbitrarily, we'll stay here for 3 weeks to see if we can get the parents to leave Mykolaiv. Don't know why 3 weeks, but 3 weeks was what we said. Fortunately, that third week, Svetlana, my wife's son, called his grandparents, said, "You need to leave now." Well, that along with having weeks of uh, rationing of food, rationing of water, electricity that would go out, no heat, finally convinced them that yes, it was time to go. However, since they were uh, 80 and 74 years old, they needed an escort. So their grandson convinced his mother-in-law to be their escort, and he got transport for them from Mykolaiv, Ukraine, over to Moldova. Now, I must tell you, you may want to get out a map because I'm going to go through a lot of Eastern countries here to find out where these places are. So then once we heard that, we then, my wife and I, Svetlana, traveled from Krakow, Poland, down to get to Moldova. We picked them up, the five of us, stuffed what we could into the car. Interesting enough, though, is that this is how they were unprepared to ever leave their country. They didn't have passports. So it was a little tricky getting through the checkpoints because they didn't have a passport. The other thing they didn't have any suitcases. And so they stuffed what clothes they could into shopping bags. picked them up, got the car packed again, and we headed from Moldova over to Romania. As we got into Romania, we looked over to the side of the road, and there were these tents. And so we pulled over because we saw Ukrainian flags and the Romanian flags together. We pulled over and stopped, and come to find out, I met a wonderful pastor, a Romanian pastor. And at the start of the war, he said to himself, "God, what can I do to help?" So he organized the businesses as well as the local people there in that village to put up tents. They provided food, clothing, information on how to get to various places there in Romania to other checkpoints around in Eastern, Western, and Europe. And that was a blessing. That was a welcoming for us as well. My father-in-law didn't have a winter coat because he was the middle of March, so he was able to pick up a winter coat to travel with us as well. We then had been in touch with friends who had been in Berlin, Germany for several years. They said, "Come to Berlin. We think we have an apartment for you." So we traveled from Romania up through to get to Berlin. It took us 3 days. When we got there, unfortunately, because there were so many people, almost 4 million Ukrainians who had been taken from their homes and now dispersed to various parts of Europe. The apartment that had we thought we had was gone. So we stayed there 10 days, see if we can get another apartment. That never came through. But once again, Svetlana's son, Sergey, said, we have an office in the transportation business there in Gdansk, Poland. Why don't you go to Gdansk and maybe we can help you find an apartment there? So we traveled from Berlin uh, to Gdansk, Poland. And there we stayed and we met wonderful people there. In fact, there people helped us find housing. They had set up for food distribution, for clothing, and everything. We even had to get a Polish identification number because without that identification number, you can't get medical care. And one day I was asking one of the doctors who was treating me, why are the Polish people so welcoming to all of these refugees? And she looked at me and said, Ukrainians are our neighbors. What else are we going to do? And when she said that, then my mind went and thought about a famous Pennsylvanian who would say, "Won't you be my neighbor?" And so I thought about, of course, Mr. Rogers and how he would say that, "Won't you be my neighbor?" Then that led me to think about the words of Christ. He said that, the first and important uh, commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your mind, soul, and body. And the second commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. For then, as you now get ready for your congregational, actually our congregational meeting, I would ask that you continue to do the same thing, to welcome people of different faiths or different people from who don't talk the way that most of us talk, or don't worship God the way we worship God, or don't speak the way we speak. Just be who you are. And there's a culture there in the tree of life that's welcoming to others. And so, as we continue with our congregational meeting today, God bless you and God bless America. Thank you. Bye now.